Have you ever heard of a prison where the very ground is soaked with hatred for those who have committed the most heinous crimes? A place where every glance is a threat and every night feels like the last? Imagine that even criminals long rejected by society despise you here. In such prisons, suffering is just the beginning. My name is Knox.
And today I will tell you about the most terrifying prisons for those who have abused children.
These are places that chill the blood, where punishment goes beyond the law and becomes a living nightmare. But that's not all. At the end, we'll visit the most horrifying place, where only those who have forever lost their chance at salvation end up. A place where hell is too soft a word. Klong Prem. Central Prison in Bangkok is one of the most inhumane places, where inmates convicted of child abuse and murder face unimaginable trials. The overcrowding creates an environment where personal space simply does not exist. Prisoners are forced to live practically on top of each other, worsening already horrific conditions. Ventilation is inadequate, turning the cells into scorching traps in summer and icy caves in winter. Diseases spread like wildfire among the inmates. Tuberculosis is just one of the many dangers they must battle. Medical care is nearly non-existent. Treatment is often delayed or unavailable altogether. Inmates with serious infections must isolate themselves in hopes of not infecting others. But the cramped cells make this nearly impossible. Klong Prem is not the only prison of this kind. Around the world, in places where authorities have little sympathy for child killers, their living conditions degrade to the level of barbaric camps. Wotton Prison in Nottinghamshire, England, is a symbol of cruelty and inhumane treatment of inmates, especially in Block B. Here, prisoners convicted of the most despicable crimes, like child murder, endure incredibly harsh conditions. Space is limited, ventilation is poor, and mold blackens the prison walls, threatening the health of the inmates. Medicine becomes a rare commodity, treated as currency, making the treatment of even the simplest ailments an impossible ordeal. Inmates suffer in constant darkness, helpless and exhausted. Within Wotton's walls, time drags on, steeped in the pain and suffering of each prisoner. This prison is just one example of the inhumane institutions around the world, specifically designed for the worst criminals. Despite varying degrees of cruelty, these institutions share one common goal: to isolate and punish those deemed the most monstrous by society. For serial killers, child murderers, and other criminals who have committed the gravest offenses against minors, prisons worldwide become veritable hellscapes. They are condemned to constant humiliation, violence, and stripped of any right to safety. The central maximum security isolator in Brazil, known as the Cemetery for the Dead, is infamous for its brutality. Inmates are often victims of both fellow prisoners and guards. The African prison Matayar in Liberia is a true survival challenge. Overcrowded cells, a complete lack of sanitation, and unbearable heat turn daily existence into torment. Russia's Colony No. 6 is also notorious for its inhuman cruelty. Here, child killers are subjected to constant bullying from other inmates. Not just fists are used, but psychological pressure, humiliation, and moral terror. However, even among these places, Attica in New York stands out as particularly sinister. Despite the $2 million compensation received by inmates for mistreatment, the harsh conditions remain unchanged. Attica continues its policy of cruelty and humiliation, turning the lives of those who committed especially grave crimes against children into an unending nightmare. There are prisons in the world that resemble a nightmare, and one of the most notorious examples is Rikers Island in New York. Imprisonment here becomes a true hell on earth, especially for those accused of child murder. Overcrowded cells lead to a constant struggle for personal space, and unsanitary conditions give rise to real epidemics of disease. Medical help is often delayed, and patients are left to suffer without the necessary treatment. Lawyer visits are also postponed, threatening the fairness of trials. Many inmates face harsh sentences, creating feelings of hopelessness and despair. Child killers endure the worst possible conditions here, facing not only isolation but also constant moral and physical abuse from other inmates. Rikers Island is a place where human dignity is in question, and survival becomes a daily battle. Butyrka. Prison in Moscow is one of those places where true horror reigns. Overcrowding, poor nutrition, and an almost complete lack of hygiene make life there unbearable. Butyrka has become a breeding ground for diseases like tuberculosis and HIV, further worsening the nightmarish conditions. Measures taken against criminals who have committed horrific crimes against children often reach extremes. In prisons like Butyrka, all inmates experience constant fear and despair, but for those who have committed the most appalling crimes, conditions are even more excruciating.
The walls in these places are soaked with cries of helplessness,
And the soul is worn down to the point where returning to normal life seems impossible. One of the most inhumane forms of imprisonment is reserved for child killers. These prisons are not just places of punishment, they are true storerooms of anger. Inmates unfortunate enough to end up here face nearly constant violence from other prisoners, who view their crimes as the most monstrous of all. One striking example is Polunsky in Texas, USA. This place has become a symbol of extreme brutality among American prisons, where the level of violence is overwhelming. Every cell is filled with an atmosphere of fear and constant threat. Another terrifying place is Manning in Busan, South Korea. Here, child killers are deprived of even the smallest glimmer of hope. Prisoners struggle to survive among equally violent criminals, with minimal access to treatment and support. The excessive violence and unsanitary conditions make Manning a true hell on earth. Prisons for child killers are not just places of confinement, they are cages of despair.
where each day could be their last.
Those imprisoned here lose their humanity, realizing that their deeds will never be forgotten. We are in a place where any display of humanity seems almost impossible. This is ADX Florence, the supermax prison infamously known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies. Built in 1994, it serves as a maximum security facility for the most dangerous criminals, including those guilty of murdering children. ADX Florence was designed so that inmates have almost no contact with the outside world or with each other. Prisoners spend 23 hours a day in solitary cells, measuring just 9 feet across, which are often the only places they see any light. Does this sound inhumane to you? That's just the beginning.
The controlled madness of this prison serves as both severe punishment
and a protective measure to ensure that such criminals can never harm anyone again. The security system includes motion sensors, electronic locks, and steel walls built to prevent any possible breaches. The psychological aspect is just as important as the physical one. Every day follows the same monotonous routine without change, which often breaks even the most resilient inmates. In places like this, questions of humanity take a back seat to the need to protect society from those who have committed the most horrifying crimes. The Tadmor military prison, located in the remote Syrian desert, became a symbol of horrors and inhumanity fit for the most heinous criminals. Built in the 1930s, it gained a particularly grim reputation in the 1980s when it housed the most dangerous and cunning killers, including those who took the most precious thing, children's lives. Tadmor didn't just deprive inmates of their freedom, it turned their fates into an endless nightmare. Brutal torture and inhumane conditions became the norm. It was reported that guards often resorted to inventive methods of torture, leaving prisoners in unbearable physical and emotional agony. While these measures were meant to eliminate the threat posed by the most ruthless criminals, they raised serious questions about the morality and humanity of the system itself. Even the most terrible crimes do not justify the inhumane treatment that spreads immeasurable suffering and pain. Tadmor became a dark symbol of how far the punishment system can go, turning justice into a nightmare. The Diyarbakir prison, located in southeastern Turkey, is one of the most sinister places on earth. Built in 1980 and designed for 700 inmates, it has repeatedly been criticized for overcrowding and inhumane conditions, especially for those convicted of the most horrifying crimes, such as child murder. Prisoners in Diyarbakir face a harsh reality that includes insufficient food, a lack of proper medical care, and constant threats of violence from both guards and other inmates. Mental and physical exhaustion becomes an integral part of their daily lives. Some of the world's most notorious prisons are home to the most despicable criminals. These are the places where those who have committed heinous crimes against children find themselves, provoking deep disgust and societal outrage. In the US, there is a maximum security prison, Polsbro, known for its harshness and lack of mercy. Here, inmates endure brutal conditions and daily humiliations. In Brazil, the Pedrinhas prison is notorious for overcrowding, a lack of basic facilities, and constant inmate violence. The demand for retribution against child murderers is so high that they often suffer spontaneous vengeance at the hands of their cellmates. In the southern province of Rwanda, in the city of Muhanga, lies the infamous Gikongoro prison. Originally built for 500 inmates, it now houses around 6,000 people. Extreme overcrowding leads to catastrophic conditions where prisoners suffer from a lack of food, water, and medical care. Among those incarcerated are child killers, one of the most reviled types of criminals. There is no space for rehabilitation, no hope for redemption. Instead, Gikongoro is a brutal survival school where the fight to stay alive is lost in a sea of human cruelty and suffering. The walls of these prisons hold terrible stories of pain and inhuman deprivation. For child killers, there is no forgiveness, and each day becomes a horrifying ordeal, plunging them deeper into despair. Conditions here are so harsh that the spirit of anyone who enters these walls is quickly broken. Gikongoro is a living testament to the horrors humans can create, highlighting a complete absence of mercy or compassion for the guilty. Kirikiri prison is one of the most overcrowded and brutal prisons in the world. Established in 1955, it is located in the Apapa district of Lagos State, Nigeria. Known for its reputation as a maximum security facility, Kirikiri holds the most violent criminals, including child killers. Inside its walls, hellish life simmers. Overcrowded cells and a lack of resources make living conditions unbearable. Many inmates suffer from diseases caused by unsanitary conditions, while medical care is practically non-existent. The guards are often more brutal than the criminals themselves, resorting to violence and torture against prisoners. These facts make Kirikiri one of the most inhumane places in the world, where human rights virtually don't exist. Here, inmates live in constant fear, not knowing if they will survive until tomorrow. In such a place, there is no room for redemption or hope for a better future. Only survival of the fittest becomes the sole aim of each day. Amid these horrifying conditions, the horror and suffering experienced by the prisoners are hard to forget, even for the guards, who witness this unending terror and pain. Prisons for child killers represent a special category of horror, where cruelty and inhumanity reach their peak. They are not created for rehabilitation, but for punishing those who committed the most vile crime. Among the most notorious is La Sabaneta prison. Opened in 1958 in Maracaibo, Venezuela, it quickly became infamous for its inhumane conditions and chaotic environment. The prison cells are so overcrowded that inmates sleep on the floor, and food and medical care are a privilege for the few. Another prison worth noting is San Quentin in California. Here, not only is the mortality rate from inmate violence high, but there is also a constant threat from the staff who rarely adhere to protocols. In Thailand's Bang Kwang prison, conditions are even more terrifying. Inmates are often shackled for the first 3 months of their sentence. The key is to never make the mistakes of those we've discussed in this video. Life always offers other paths, and violence or crime will never lead to anything good. Want to change your life? Join our team. We are looking for writers, narrators, editors, and creative producers for new projects. If you're interested, follow the link in the description and submit an application.
Thanks for watching.